Introducing business change and introducing MBSE into your organization. John Holt is, I think, a well-known character. Professor John Holt, leading figure in the world of systems engineering, gained his PhD from 1994. He's done lots. His name is everywhere. If you hadn't seen it, and same with Simon, they teach this stuff and really are on a evangelist type of activity to get this into everyday life. So I want to thank them for coming and presenting tonight, because it's good to see that. And it goes with our theme, business change, MBSE, changing the culture. And John and Simon, I'll just let you to it. And we look forward to your message.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Mike. So I'm going to share my screen. It's nice to see so many people here. Some familiar names, some not so familiar names, but that's always good. Right. Simon's going to be inwardly cursing now because I'm attempting to do some technology. Right. Okay. Simon, is that working?
Yes, I can see it. So I guess everybody else can.
Okay, miracle of miracles. Well, thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks very much for inviting us. It's been we've been waiting too long for this invitation, but there we go. So tonight we've been asked to talk about introducing business change and specifically implementing MBSE in your organization, because if it wasn't about implementing MBSE in your organization, yet it was about business change, I suspect you would have the wrong two people to give the presentation. But there you go. So yeah, so just in case you don't know, if I was taller and thinner, I would look a bit like that one on the left. Simon?
If I was a disembodied head, I'd look a bit like the one on the right.
Yeah, so Simon always has that just got out of bed look about him, which is what he's going for. So as Mike said, Simon and I both work for Scarecrow Consultants, and we're both involved with INCOSE UK on various levels. So I'm the current technical director. Simon, amongst other things, is the series editor for the range of books that you might have seen recently, published by INCOSE UK, in particular the Don't Panic range of books and the Advanced Applications of Systems Engineering range of books, which we'll try and sell you all at the end of the presentation. But there we go. Anything to add at this point, Simon?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, other than that, we've known each other for probably 21, 22 years now.
Yeah, all you had to do is you had to know the age of my middle child and add one. And that's how you figure out how long Simon and I have known one another. So, Mike, before we go any further, are you recording this, did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the record button's on, right, Allison?
Yes, it's being recorded.
Right, I'll try not to swear then. It doesn't always work. Those of you that might have attended the ASEC this year might have seen me swear by because it was very emotional, but there we go. So we're here to talk about introducing business change into an organization, and specifically in the form of MBSE. So essentially, when we talk about, we have to be able to change the way that we do our business. And sometimes this is predictable. So for example, we might be working on new projects, we might have new business or whatever. And at other times it's thrust upon us without any regard whatsoever for our acquiescence or well-being. So things like COVID, for example, and things like Brexit. So I've just probably mentioned the two biggest topics of conversation over the last 2 years there, neither of which we've been able to solve as yet, despite applying modelling to them. And this is something in particular, you know, something like COVID, if you actually just see, it's fundamentally changed the way that we do a lot of business. So these business changes come along, but we have to be able to adapt to them. And one of the ways that we can actually adapt is if we're applying systems engineering, if we're a systems engineering organization. Now at Scarecrow, we're a very small business, so we were fortunate in that we were able to, I'll say simply remodel our business and keep going throughout the whole of these uncertain times. And in particular, model-based systems engineering gives us the basis to react to business change. So there's many ways that MBSE will benefit us, but one way in particular is actually if you model your business using MBSE, it makes you very. Simon's going to be furious now if I use this word. It's going to make you very agile. It's going to make you very able to change.
No, John, I've got to just show you something. I don't know whether it'll focus.
Sorry, I'm not. I've got a special filter on my glasses, and if I haven't written a book, I can't read what it says on the front.
Yeah, so, it says learning agile. So there you go.
But it actually makes us very able to react to change very, very quickly and in a sort of agile way.
John, can I just jump in there because I think that's a really important point, because I remember, right when the lockdown happened, you phoning me up, and because we got a model of what we do as a business and the services that we do and how we deliver them, we could very, very quickly go, these things need to go virtual. How are we going to do it? We knew exactly what we needed to address because we understood our business in a systems engineering way, which is not necessarily true for a lot of other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, we went from having a full order book for the next 3 months of work to literally nothing overnight, because the vast majority of our work is face-to-face, the consultancy, the training, and so on. And so we literally, on the Friday, we had a full order book for 3 months, and literally on the Monday morning, rang Simon up and saying, we've got no work now. And because our inbox is just full of people saying, we're postponing. So that's one very important aspect of MBSE. This people often overlook because it's obviously people say it's all about development, and development's a large part of MBSE, but you mustn't forget that you can systems engineer your business as well, and particularly in the times that we're living in, this is very, very important. So one of the things that we do, I would argue, training aside, it's probably the biggest part of our business by far, is helping organizations introduce MBSE as a way of working, because it's not something you can do overnight. So as Simon said, we've been working together for 21 years now, and we've been doing this for decades now, and it's taken us almost this long to really get it refined down to what really works. And we've seen people deploy things very badly, we've seen people fail, we've seen people succeed. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is really, I think it's fair to say, so it's the sort of summation of probably almost 60 years of experience between the two of us in actually deploying this kind of stuff. And it used to be, back in the early days, people used to think, well, you could just teach people to use UML, for example, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and then on the Thursday they would be doing model-based systems engineering, for example. And this is far from the truth, and it's certainly not an overnight activity. And you do require, as with any business change, some sort of strategy. And if you look at how you go about any business change, there's some key things that you need to do. And so basically we've learned this the hard way in some cases, but also then when we look at other best practice business change mechanisms, that they're essentially this massive parallels between them. So what we're going to talk about tonight, so one of the reasons it's called business change is the techniques that we talk about you could actually apply to anything, to any form of business change. We happen to be applying it to model-based systems engineering. And as I say, it's been essentially our whole careers. So with that in mind, the thing we're going to talk about is, it didn't have a name till about 2 years ago, did it, Simon? And we were sat down saying we really must have a name for this sort of thing, because each of these three prongs had kind of evolved separately over the years. And then, they started coalescing probably about 5 or 6 years ago into this approach that we call Trinity. And there's no other reason for that than we like spaghetti westerns, and it's a nifty name. Basically, it doesn't stand for anything. It's got nothing to do with crows or blackbirds or anything like that. It's just kind of a nice name that implies three things. So really, because if you're doing any sort of project, If you were doing a systems engineering project, the first thing I would hope anyone would do would say, understand why, understand your requirements, understand your needs. What is it you need? What are your goals? How are you going to measure them, and so on. When it comes to business change, people tend not to do that. They just say, we'll just throw any old solution at a problem that we don't actually understand. And this is, and particularly in MBSE, we see this all the time. And, the number of people that we see applying things like architectural frameworks blindly, processes, standards, modeling languages, without understanding what they're setting out to achieve in the first place, it's staggering, and it's really quite scary. And changing your business, changing your organization, and very importantly, changing the mindset in your organization, as we said, it's not quick, and it's by no means cheap, particularly if you get it wrong. And so what we're going to talk about is what, in our experience, is kind of getting it right. Okay, and so the Trinity is really, it makes you think about three things, things that we call considerations. And basically we talk about the why, so the reason behind things. And again, as systems engineers, we must always question everything that we do, and we must always ensure that it's adding value to what we do. And if it's not adding value, then don't do it, quite frankly. And this is very important, because people often say that there's a big overhead involved with MBSE and so on, and there isn't. If you do it properly, it will save you time and effort and money. There's an overhead when you don't do it properly. It's an easy trap to fall into, to create, I'll say, I'm going to do air quotes now, models of things, pictures of things in particular, that are adding no value. That's a waste of time. That's an overhead. If you do things properly in a structured way, it isn't. The second of the three things in the Trinity, and there's no particular order in this, is what. Okay, what's our capability? What's our existing capability, and also what do we want it to do? Basic, good best practice gap analysis. Where are we now? Where do we want to be in the future? Okay, in this case, with regards to our capability, what's the ability that we have as an organization, and where do we want to be in the future? And then the third thing we look at then is basically, how do we evolve this in terms of our people, our process and tools? Because as we said, it's not an overnight step, and much of what we do in Scarecrow is born of frustration, and it's dealing with clients over and over again and hitting the same problems and dealing with the same issues that we have. And so we come up with things that help us solve those problems and address those issues. So we're going to talk about these three things briefly, and then we're going to do something that's very brave. We're going to attempt to show you something online and get everybody involved, and anything could happen at that point, essentially. So we're going to talk about these three things. So Simon, I'm going to hand over to you in a moment to talk about the reason. Then I'll talk about the capability, this thing we call MBS in the slide. And then Simon, if you want to do the Lego figure, and then we'll dive into our soon to be regretted online live demo. So. Okay, over to you then, Si.
Okay, yeah. So as John said, the first sort of leg of the Trinity, if you like, that you need to think about is reason, and that may seem, very, very obvious, but as John's hinted at, we come across lots and lots of systems engineering organizations that say, can you come and help us transition to a model-based systems engineering organization? And when we say, well, why do you want to do that? What is your reason? Why do you want to do MBSE? What do you want it to do for you? We're met with blank stares, or because we think it's a good idea with nothing to back it up. So the first part of Trinity is about identifying your reason, your requirements, if you will. And there are sort of three common methods that we use. If we're doing it with people that are sort of literate in modeling, we will do what we call context modeling. So we'll capture requirements in context using things like the SysML use case diagram and associated diagrams. And that's very, very powerful. It means that you're starting to actually apply, you know, modeling to understanding why you want to do MBSE. So you're starting applying MBSE to why you want to do MBSE. If we're doing this with a group that you know may not have a modeling background, and maybe, you know, with sort of senior managers who are involved, we have an approach called team storming, which is a sort of combination team building and brainstorming approach, which is also published by INCOSE in the UK, and that's got a whole set of sort of tools. They're all graphically based, but it's about sort of drawing simple pictures and working with things like post-it notes and index cards and whatever, and doing things like empathy maps. And that's a very, very good way of working, as I say, with non-technical people, with people that don't know modeling, and also with large groups as well. It works very, 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 very well with large groups. I mean, we've done, you know, a team storming session with, you know, 40, 50 people in the room, working in sort of groups of about 4 or 5. And then, of course, you've got, you know, structured text, which, you know, for us as MBSE people is anathema, really. But, you know, if that's all you've got, then that's fine. But you know, any of these techniques, or in fact all of these techniques working together, they're established techniques essentially for establishing your requirements for why you as an organization want to change. And in this case, you know, why do you want to be in an organization that is adopting a model-based systems engineering approach? So establishing that reason is absolutely sort of fundamental to you know, going forward and making any change, because as John said, if you don't know why you're doing it in the first place, it's very, very easy to just throw tools and money. You know, we get people say to us, oh, we decided to do MBSE. We've spent £1 million on tool vendor X's tool. We've given, you know, 100 engineers licenses for a SysML tool, and it's got worse. Well, of course it has, because you haven't understood what you want to do. You haven't understood capabilities and things like that. So, you know, understanding the reason why you want to change, what you want to get out of that change, is absolutely crucial. And as we said, sort of established systems engineering techniques can help you to do that. And then that then leads you into capability, which is the sort of next leg. Are you going to do that, John?
Right, so I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce this thing here in the bottom left corner. And this is something that we refer to as MBSE in a slide. So I'm going to whiz through this in about sort of under 10 minutes. So normally I can take, anybody that knows me will know I can talk for as long as you want me to. I can talk for an hour just on this particular slide that we're going to build up. So I'm going to do it quite quickly, and I appreciate that we've actually got a good audience with us that will appreciate these things, and hopefully nobody's coming in this from complete fresh. But what we must remember, I will also point out at this juncture, there's going to be more things on this slide. It isn't just the word system in the middle of the slide, okay? That there is more to it than that. But the system lies at the heart of everything that we do. And if you think about system, this sounds really, really obvious, but systems engineering is, to misquote INCOSE, is all about delivering successful systems, okay? And we must never forget that. We must never lose sight of that. It's surprisingly easy to forget what it is we're going to do in the first place, what our overall goal is. So we must always remember that our goal, first and foremost, is to deliver that system, develop and deliver that system. Even when we're applying MBSE, our goal is not to produce a model. Our goal is to develop and deliver that system. It just happens that we're using a model to do that as a means to an end. So, you know, the model isn't the goal in itself. The goal is to develop systems. Now, in a traditional sort of document-based approach to systems engineering, all of the information, all of the knowledge, and all of the data associated with that system would live in and be owned by typically a set of documents, and also, very importantly, inside people's heads. Okay, so all of the information and all of the knowledge associated with that system is split across myriad different sources, whether they're formal documents, informal sketches, inside people's heads, folklore, or whatever they're going to be. when we talk about a model-based systems engineering approach, we have this idea of a model. And what the model is, it's a simplified representation of our system, or an abstraction of our system. Now, you probably heard the expression a single source of truth. And what we mean by that, it doesn't mean it has to be in the same location or on a single database or anything like that. But what it means is, if we want to know anything about our system, if we want to know anything at all about our system, we interrogate the model, because the model is the single source of truth. And that's what we take as our truth. Now, what happens at this point when you're speaking with, dare I say, fools and idiots? What people will say at this point is, oh, but all models are wrong, because they're misquoting a paper by Box that they probably haven't read in the first place anyway. And they'll say, well, models can never be complete. And well, of course they can't. But the aim of the model is not to contain every single thing it's possible to know about the system. The aim of the model is to contain enough information to allow us to deliver that system. And this is a very, very important distinction. It's not as much information as possible, it's enough information to deliver the system. And that's absolutely crucial to understand, because then we can have a complete model and we can have a consistent and correct model. Okay, if it's open-ended, if it's not bounded, then of course it can never be complete. Okay, we can always add more and more information. With that in mind, the basic unit of information that in our model is what we refer to as a view. And a view in its simplest form is a collection of information. However, we need to make sure that this is a valid view. And to do that, we've got to answer a couple of questions, one of which is who, or to be more accurate, which stakeholders would be interested in looking at this view. Okay. And if we can establish that, we also have to establish why. What benefits will they get? What value will they get from looking at this view? And if we can't answer those two questions, we don't do it. It is as simple as that. So it's coming back to what Simon was saying about the why. We always ask why, whether it's the overall approach or the individual views that comprise our approach. And in order for it to be a model, all of these views must be consistent with all the other views, because if they're not, we just end up with a bunch of text and a bunch of pictures. And we're not interested in drawing pictures, we're interested in modeling. You can imagine if the model was conceptually a big ball of information, like a big sphere of information, each time that we create a view, it's like opening up a very small window into that big ball of information. We need to make sure that we open up enough windows to give us the confidence that we understand the model and that we've got enough information to develop our system. The way that we communicate these views to different stakeholders will depend on the language that we're going to use. So when you do modeling, people will say, well, we must have a common language, and people will often say that will be SysML. That's only half of the battle, because one of the things, when we talk about a common language, we need a spoken language, which is a basic communication mechanism, such as English, German, Welsh, or whatever. But we also need a domain-specific language. When we talk about something like SysML, a notation that we can see here, that's the equivalent of saying, let's all speak English. Okay, let's all speak SysML. It doesn't mean that because we're all speaking English, the same spoken language, we will never miscommunicate again, or we will never have any ambiguity again. It's the same with SysML. It gives us an excellent basic communication mechanism, but that's all it is. It's a communication mechanism. It doesn't mean that we're going to absolutely understand everything that we say. For that, we need a domain-specific language. And like any other spoken language, we can take the same source information, the same view, and we could translate that in the same way we could translate it into English or German or Welsh. We could translate this view into SysML or UML or text or BPMN or formal methods, mathematics, set theory, simulations, however you want to do it. Okay, and that's very important, because one of the big myths that we have associated with MBSE is that everything must be in SysML, and this is not the case. We choose a spoken language, we choose a notation depending on the stakeholder we're trying to communicate with, and this is fundamental to everything that we do. Yes, we're going to use SysML for lots of things, but also if we've got a target audience that doesn't understand SysML, we don't use SysML. but very importantly, it's still a visualization of our view. It's still an accurate representation of our view, and therefore part of the model. If you imagine a view is like opening up a small window into our model, into our big ball of information, then a notation is like applying a lens or a filter to that view. We're still seeing the same information, however, it's slightly colored, or we're looking at it from a slightly different point of view. So system L sits over here, that's the visualization, that's the notation. But if we want to create our model and have the same look or feel about it, we need to have some structure behind the model. If this was a document-based system, we would use templates. In an MBSE system, in a model-based system, we have the equivalent of kind of the equivalent of templates, not quite the same, but things that we refer to as viewpoints. And what a viewpoint will do is define the template for the view, but also capture information concerning the view, such as who, which stakeholders, and why, what value, what benefits are you going to get from that view. It will always also help us define the structure and template of that view. The viewpoints themselves are based on a thing, big fancy word of the evening, based on an ontology, and the ontology is the domain, amongst other things, is the domain specific language. That's the part of the model where we identify our concepts and we define the terminology associated with those concepts. When I put those two things together, it's what we call a framework. And the framework gives me the blueprint for the information that's, that makes up my model. This gives me the information, and there's no implied order towards that, or what order we need to do things in. We represent that in our process set. It's the process set that describes how to use it. If you went back 10 or 15 years, the world went process mad. Since then, we've realized that actually we need to separate out the information from the process, because we can have a common set of information, yet different approaches to using that information. And it's this core set of information, it's this framework that gives me the commonality. If I put some boxes around these, we can see we've got the approach on the left-hand side, the system in the middle, and the visualization on the right-hand side. Notice that my approach is independent of my visualization that we're seeing there. So that's MBSE in a slide. And if you think taking 10 slides to build up one slide, he's taking liberties with the term MBSE in a slide, I'm going to add two more things to it. One is implementation, which is where we consider tools. And one is standards, where we consider things like compliance or any other best practice models. So this is what we refer to as MBSE in a slide in a bit. And what this allows me to do is to capture my capability and to look at this and say, well, where are we now? Where's your business now? And then where do we want to be? So for example, as Simon said, we'll deal with some organizations, they would have just bought a tool and they won't have any of this. Okay, some organizations would have chosen a notation such as SysML and not have any of this. Some would have chosen a framework and not have any of the right-hand side. It gives us a very good map on where people are at the moment. And what's interesting is that certain industries tend to start from different points. Okay, so for example, if you've ever had the misfortune to work in defense, there's a lot of emphasis on frameworks, particularly if you've ever used something like MODAF or DODAF or anything like that. A lot of software types tend to start over here. When you get heavily regulated industries and safety critical industries, for example, medical devices and rail, this is one of the key parts that we need to be understanding when it comes to applying MBSE. And a large part of the value for, and again, this is a generic statement now, it's a bit of a sweeping statement for areas like rail, is the whole area of compliance, okay, with standards, with legislation, with best practice guidelines and so on. When people say, what's the value of MBSE? It depends on who you are. It depends on what it is you're setting out to do. As Simon said, we need to know why. But actually, when we start to look at some industries, compliance is a major driving force behind it. And this can be one of the big areas where we deliver value to a particular industry. So as I say, in rail, when we do quite a lot of work in rail, and this left-hand side here is where we see a lot of the value coming out. What you have to bear in mind is one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying so look at the right hand side of visualization and the tools. Think of all the different tools that you're using, not just the SysML tools and the MBSE tools. What about the scheduling tools that you're using? What about the electrical wiring tools that you're using and those kinds of things? What about the civil engineering type tools that you're using? You might be using things like BIM as well. All we're changing here is the right hand side. Simulation tools, mathematical prediction tools, they all sit on this right hand side here. When we do MBSE, it's not all about SysML. It's about making sure that all of these different views, the visualizations of them and the tools are represented over here so that they're all consistent with one another and that we get an overarching consistent approach. So we use this to help us identify capability, because if we know which of these boxes you can tick on here, we know where you need to go next. If we know where you want to be, so some organizations are all about tools, some are all about notations, some are all about compliance. It gives us a steer on your current capability and indeed your target capability. So in fact, this sheet, we use this as a worksheet, MBSE in a slide in a bit, and we genuinely use this as a way to capture the information that we want to learn about the company. So this is the second prong of Trinity, which is capability. Can we put on here, where are we now and where do we want to be? Okay. The third prong of Trinity is, I'm going to hand over to Simon again, and it's a thing called evolution. Microphone, Simon. Microphone, Simon.
We've talked about reason and we've talked about capability. They're two of the three legs. And before I talk about evolution in any detail, I just want to emphasize something that John said right at the beginning. We're starting with reason and then going on to capability and evolution. You can start, for example, with capability and actually sit there and say, what's our current capability? And then, use that to explore the reason. There's no fixed order to do this, but you do have to do all sort of three parts because they're all mutually interdependent. So the reasons about the what, the why, if you like, the why are we doing it? What do we want to get out of it? The capabilities about what can we already do and what do we want to be able to do in the future? And then the evolutions about how do we get there? And we use this this model that we've got here that covers 5 stages of evolution, from an organization at stage 1, which is completely document based. And by that, as John mentioned earlier on, what we mean is that all of this sort of information about the system is spread over, potentially hundreds of documents, right up to stage 5, which is an organization that's completely model based. Everything they do is model based. It's all in models. They're doing advanced queries on models and generating stuff from models. And there are recognized sort of transitions and things that you have to do to get from one stage to another. It's not just about saying, okay, we're document based, we want to get to model based. There's a set of typical activities that you see when you move between the stages. Hopefully they're going to come up. Thanks, John. So what we've got on this slide here is some very, very high level generic activities that we sort of typically see happening in moving from stage to stage. So, from stage 1 to stage 2, this is sort of typically, you're document based. You want to start, moving away, still using documents, but a bit more maths, bit more graphics, maybe. This is about, carrying out your assessment, identifying your goals, often MBSE by stealth. If there is somebody in your organization that is an evangelist for MBSE, sometimes you can start to use them to roll MBSE out without telling people that you're doing it. But typically, if you're at stage 1, you absolutely need to know what it is that you want to do and what your goals are for business change. When we're at stage 2, we're starting to use notation, maybe often very, very informally. People might be drawing diagrams that look a little bit like UML or SysML, for example. And you know, if you want to go from that stage to what we call model enhanced, which is where you're starting to do modeling and you're using notations correctly, this is where we start to see, you know, activities such as notation training and tool evaluation. You know, it's a massive mistake if you're doing the MBSE journey to just tell people, oh, you're using SysML or UML or Notation X tomorrow, without giving people any training in that, because you may as well just set fire to your money. Stage where, you know, most of the information is in the model, maybe still some documents, and when we're moving up to stage 4, which for a lot of organizations, you know, that might be sort of where they'll end their MBSE thing. You're looking now at having staff that are trained in MBSE. You're looking at defining your processes in a model-based way, as John talked about the compliance and the process sections of the MBSE in a slide in a bit. You're looking at selecting tools that you're going to use, and you absolutely have to have a framework and ontology in at that point. You cannot be doing model-based systems engineering without having a framework. If you know, you can use SysML as much as you want, but if you haven't got a framework and an ontology in place, you're not doing MBSE, you're just drawing SysML diagrams. And then the sort of final step to the, you know, the ultimate goal, you know, if you're going to go the whole journey, is fully model based. And this is where you're looking at things like introducing maturity metrics for your models, so you can see, you know, how your models are evolving through time. The maturity metrics and continuous improvement for your processes. Starting to tailoring, you know, your tool sets so that the tools work with the way that you as an organization wants to work. And that's a really important point, that a lot of organizations buy tools or adopt tools, and the tools end up changing the way that organization works. And it should be the other way around. The organization's processes should drive the tools, and all decent tools will allow you to tailor them to do that. But we've also got things like competency assessment now for your staff, for their MBSE competency, and their, you know, understanding of various notations and understanding that, you know, what a framework is and what it does for them. And you've also got what we call advanced applications. So this might be things like product line engineering or variant modeling.
God, yeah.
And
that variant model was the bane of our life for about 3 years,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Because we would talk to people and we go, we're at stage 1, we want to do MBSE. By the way, can we do variant modeling first, please?
yeah, I mean, I literally had we did this for I can talk about this because they've spoken at INCOSE about this. I did some stuff with Jaguar. They were probably at stage 2. They didn't actually want to get all the way to stage 5. They wanted to get really probably only to stage 3, but backed up with a framework. So they decided they were going to have a framework and an ontology and a defined process, but not do it up to stage 4. They weren't going to use tools. It was all still going to be fairly document based with some modeling, but they absolutely wanted to have a framework in place. And literally at the end of the first day that I had a workshop with them, at I think it was 5:15, and we were meant to be finishing at 5:30, the guy I was with said, can we spend the last 15 minutes talking about how we build variant modeling into it, how we do? And it's like, well, no, because that's a whole week's conversation in its own right.
And that's it. That sits over there, and if you're over here, you can't go to there without doing this stuff first. And
No.
it's yeah. So yeah, variant modeling was the bane of our lives for years, wasn't it? So
yeah.
Sorry, Simon.
No, that's right. So what we do as part of Trinity, when it comes to the evolution sort of leg of Trinity, is, you know why you want to do MBSE, or you know what business change you want and why you're doing it. You know your current capabilities and what your future capabilities are. We then use this diagram here again as a worksheet to mark on what stage we're at the moment, and actually what stage do we want to get to, because as I say, not everybody wants to get to stage 5. And we can use this then and look at the typical kind of activities to to identify what an organization needs to do actually to make that evolution from stage wherever 1 or 2 up to stage 3, 4, or 5. And so those 3 legs all come together in what we call the sort of the evolutionary path for the organization, which captures why they're doing it, what their existing capabilities are, what their future capabilities that they want, and how they're going to do it by going through these various stages and identifying the activities that organization needs to go through, and actually putting some time bands on there as well. So you're going to do notation training in the first 6 months. After 18 months, you're going to have a framework and have implemented variant modeling, whatever it is. But we use all the worksheets to help with an organization come up with this essentially plan, this evolutionary plan for how they go from where they are to where they want to be. And for the evolution and the capability aspects, we have a technique called Ravens. If we do it face to face, we've got physical sort of pieces, tangible sort of pieces of plastic with words on that you can slot together. That people with no sort of background in modeling can use to explore those questions around capability and evolution. Now, John's had this idea that we're going to do this remotely now.
If you look in your chat, there's a link. If you all click on that link, it will take you to a web page.
Now, have you shared it in the right way, John?
Yeah. Look, we've already got a visiting raccoon, a visiting shrimp, a lobster of some description, some sort of fish. So we've already got 10 people on. There's a walrus there. Oh, they're all 11 now. So you should all be able to see this. It looks like a sort of big letter Y in the middle. Visiting birds all over the place. Visiting raccoon as well. So, so Simon, do you want to just say a few words about what we've got here on the screen?
Yes. So at the heart of Ravens, there are these 3 legs on people, process, and tools, and I've sort of touched on that very, very briefly previously when I said this sort of process should drive tools. We have this mantra in Scarecrow: people, process, tools. That you need competent people that can carry out your fit-for-purpose processes that drive the tools. And what Ravens allows you to do is it allows you to take pieces from the side. So the red ones are all to do with people, the sort of bluey ones are to do with process, and the sort of purpley ones are to do with tools. It allows you to align those on the legs. As I say, if we were doing this really, we've got physical pieces of laser cut plastic that we use, but it allows an organization to look at the pieces and say, actually, yes, we're interested in staff competency, or we're interested in developing a bespoke framework. So, for example, you can drag a bespoke framework on. We're the use of standards is absolutely vital to our organization. So you can add standards, and there's various other pieces that add more detailed information on. So the big pieces tend to be sort of quite large areas such as standards, patterns, competence, and then the smaller areas, the smaller pieces are often sort of more detailed pieces. And what you're sort of all doing, just sort of playing around with it now, is exactly what happens on a real Raven session. We actually don't run the session. We might put the first couple of pieces down and then we stand back. And what you guys are doing is absolutely the way it should be used. That sort of people, pick pieces up and add them on and add pieces on and discuss it amongst themselves. Now, we do this in 2 stages as part of Trinity. The first stage is we identify all of the various aspects, people, process, tools that we think are relevant to us, and then we essentially dot vote, like some of you are doing, and we use the red, the yellow, and the green dot votes to help identify those capabilities that we have, good capability, and we'll mark green. Some capability will mark yellow, no capability will mark red. And we allow people to dot vote. So, you might get some squares that, 5 people might put green and 1 person might put red. Well, we treat that as green, but we can take a consensus. And when we've done that first pass through, we capture that, because essentially what we've done now is we've said, okay, this is what we can do in people, in process and tools. These are the things we're good at. These are the things that we've got some capability. These are the things that we've got no capability at, potentially. And we've done this with organizations where they've been very, very surprised at things that have come out red in one case, and in some cases actually things that come out green. And I had a senior manager say, oh, I didn't realize we could actually do that in-house, and it turned out that they could. The second sort of pass through of ravens is after everyone has gone through and put all of the pieces on, and some of these ravens diagrams can end up very, very complex at the end of the first pass through, with lots of things on. If an organization is sort of going all in, you're typically going to have patterns and standards and frameworks and notation and tools and all of those kind of things on. The second pass through is we get people to then say, okay, of those things that are generally the yellow or the red ones, because the green ones you're already doing. So the things that you've got some capability or no capability in, now mark them either as important. That means they are things that you want to develop and be able to do, or you can mark them as not important. So that means that for this implementation of MBSE, maybe you're doing a phased implementation. Actually, we're not going to bother with that aspect for now. So I can see that we've got systems engineering process. Somebody's marked that as white. So okay, yeah, we're very good at that, so we don't need to bother that with that anymore. Competence, yeah, we've got some ability there. That's been marked blue, so that's something that needs to be addressed. So at the end of this, all of the pieces, and as I say, it's mainly the red and the green, red and the yellow pieces. All of the pieces that have got the blue blobs on them are the capabilities that the organization has said they need to develop, they want to develop as part of their sort of transition to MBSE. And then we'll take this with the marked up worksheet for what capabilities they've got, and we can then do a sort of third pass through this. John, if you want to sort of plonk some things on, where we use the black pieces, and the black pieces tend to be the kinds of things that you need to do to address it. So it's things like creating a bespoke training, or integrating tools, or evaluating tools, or doing competency assessments, or CPD. And a lot of the pieces come in duplicates. So you'll have two tool training A's, because what happens is things start then to link across the arms. So we can use the black pieces to essentially link across the arms. So you might have the fact that, yes, you want to use a particular SysML tool like Enterprise Architect. You might have identified that on the tools leg. So on the people leg, you might then have identified that you need tool training, and you can link those both together with the same black piece.
Right. And so we need to return to the presentation now.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, sorry to cut you off there, but we've only got a minute left. So basically we use this information, then it will allow us to populate the capability, which is that one, and it will allow us to populate the evolution. On the basis of that and combining it with the reason, it means that we can actually develop an MBSE deployment. on that. So just to conclude then, that's the basic whistle stop tour of Trinity. If you want to know more, this red book in the bottom right corner is all about Trinity. Don't let it stop you buying all the other books. Christmas is never too far away to start thinking about loved ones. Buy all 17 of mine and Simon's books and get a free shrine. So I think that really concludes what we want to say. Simon, any final words of wisdom in the last 15 seconds?
No.
There we go. That's the conclusion from Simon. Any words of wisdom? No. Okay. Well, Mike, in that case,
wisdom is overrated. There you go. There's my words of wisdom.
Well, hey, thank you two. That was fantastic. And I think everybody got a lot out of it, particularly the tools and the ideas that these can actually be implemented, and that people can actually understand them, given the right format. And interesting, I heard a PMI presentation on the design thinking and project management approach. So I think this is catching on in a lot of different areas that we're not aware. Perhaps you're ahead of the game here. Any questions from anybody before the time is up? Feel free to speak up. Anything for John and Simon?
Stunned silence is what we like. We take apathy as a vote of consent.
I mean, as you can tell, we could talk about this for another 3 hours quite easily. So,
yeah.
Okay.
I've got to go down to the beach and have a drink because we're not allowed outside yet in pubs. I live in Wales and we're not even allowed to go and sit outside a pub. We have to go to hang out on the beach like winos. So
there you go. Well, you're further west, so you got a little more daylight than we do have here in Bristol. So, have fun, John, Simon. Thanks a lot, and
okay,
maybe
thanks
we'll have
a lot,
you back
guys.
later.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.